How did I learn to do mastering in a day? Well, I'll tell you the story of how I learned to do mastering in a day. It started this way. I went to Joe Lambert Mastering, and I said to him, I want to learn mastering. People are asking me to master records for them because I used to have friends who were all musicians, so they'd ask me to record and mix for them. But now all my friends are audio engineers because I write for Sonicscoop and I interview audio engineers. So all my friends are audio engineers, so people are asking me to master their stuff. They're mixing and they want me to master. But I felt like I could only do this for real if I was in a big, fancy analog studio with great speakers, and most importantly, even more than the fancy gear, just being in an environment where I felt like I could really hear things and hear things better than my clients. I knew that that was one of the biggest values of mastering. So I wanted to do that in a good room. So I did that at Joe Lambert's place. Now, Joe taught me pretty much everything he knew about mastering in like an hour. And he's like, yeah, here's how I do it. Watch me do a master. Here's what I think about when I'm mastering. And it was surprisingly simple. I could really learn in broad strokes his overall approach, not his way to solve every single problem, but what he's trying to do on every single record. He kind of told me in an hour. And that was really formative for me. But really learning mastering was the first project I sold as a mastering engineer. And I charged way too low of a rate. I charged something like $40 per track, which was a rate that I knew I didn't want to be at because most people who would master records for me at that rate, I just didn't like the results that I got. But I felt like I couldn't charge more because I was just learning it. So I was charging $40 a track. I landed this first record from some people I hadn't even met before. And they gave me an EP to master. And little did I know, they were also having a test master done by someone in a much more expensive studio. They were charging, I think, about $150 a track, and they were having them master one track, and they were paying me a similar amount, slightly more, to master the entire EP. And then they were like, if Justin's isn't good enough, then we'll pony up and we'll spend more on these other more expensive guys. I didn't know this at the time. All I knew is that I wanted the master to sound as good as it possibly could, and it should compete with, I would not rest until I was like, I know that Greg Calby or Bob Ludwig or whoever couldn't do a better job on this record than I did. Like someone else might be able to make it sound different, but there's no way they could make it sound better. And it took me to master that first EP, probably something like 4 or 5 hours for the first song. And I kid you not, spent 10 to 12 hours mastering these 4 songs, which is not something I would do anymore. But that's the one day that it took me to learn how to master. I'm happy to say that there was a other big name studio where they paid, I think, more than $150 a track to have it mastered. They heard mine and they heard theirs and they were like, you only charge us $40, but you win. Like yours is way better and your communication is better. And I think if we feel like you get our music and our aesthetic better, we want to work with you, not that guy. And that was awesome. That was a great first result. But that one day that it took me to get good at mastering took 10, 11, 12 years of messing around with audio engineering and mixing and recording and understanding the fundamentals. So adding on that skill took me a day. Now, that said, I still had a lot to learn when it came to mastering. And I would say that I wasn't really confident with mastering to where I felt like I could do things quickly, reliably, and know how to handle every single problem that came at me until I was mastering for at least 2, maybe 3 years, mastering exclusively. And that amount of time, that time to basic understanding, basic competence, that 2 to 3 year mark, when you add that on top of mastery in a related field, all of a sudden the progression is so much faster. Right? It's like if you learn to shoot a bow and arrow, bare bow with nothing on it, and then you eventually upgrade to a fancier compound bow. I'm sorry to use an archery analogy. That's one of my springtime summer hobbies. It's like switching from one to the other is not nearly as hard as learning the first thing. Just like if you already know how to ride a bicycle, learning to ride a motorcycle isn't going to be like, you're not going to be great at riding a motorcycle the first day, but it's going to be a lot easier than if you had never learned to ride a bicycle and now you're trying to ride a motorcycle from day one. So it's the same kind of thing. And these numbers, I think you're going to find everywhere. And if you're going slower than this, and if you feel like you've been at this for a year or two and you don't have basic understanding to where you can impress a total non-musician, and if after 4 or 5 years you don't feel like you have a saleable skill, and if after 10 years of doing something you don't feel like there's a level of mastery where you can be maybe not toe to toe with the best in the world, but in the same general world. Like, you could have one of your songs played again next to one of theirs, and you wouldn't be embarrassed. If you're not hitting those milestones, there's probably a few reasons for it. If you like that short clip, you might love the full-length video that it came from, or you can consider becoming a member. Just hit the join button down below. If you really want to go deep, check out one of my great full-length courses like Mixing Breakthroughs, Compression Breakthroughs, or Mastering Demystified. Each one of them is guaranteed to change the way you work forever for the better or your money back. Hope to see you on the other side.